Today on Project 380 I'm going to be installing the front suspension, and I'm going to start off with the front lower control arm. You didn't really think I was going to put this rusty old stuff back on, did you? Of course I'm not going to be using that rusty old stuff. Today I've got a pretty sick set of upgrades for the front suspension. So the first upgrades I've got is the full front suspension from Destroy or Die, and that consists of adjustable front lower control arm, front upper adjustable camber arm, and the front super knuckle. The second upgrade is a full set of energy suspension poly bushers that I purchased from BOFI Racing. And the third upgrade is some alignment bolts and some alignment locks from Skidnation. So the first thing I'm going to install today is the front lower control arms from Destroy or Die. These are quite a substantial upgrade from the standard front lower control arms. They're a bit of a different design, so there is a lot more clearance here to allow you to get more angle when drifting. There's adjustment here where the lower ball joint would go in. There's 3 sets of adjustments, so you can pick which one you need. The design allows for optimum caster and camber, and by the looks of it, they're going to be a lot stronger. But now I'm going to take you in for a closer look to see what they look like side by side with the original front lower control arms. So looking side by side, it's quite clear to see the differences. The Destroy or Die one looks a hell of a lot stronger compared to the pressed metal type. And if we put them on top of each other, you're going to see where the differences really start to appear. So as you can see, there's a lot more clearance here compared to the standard one. This is going to allow the wheel to come round further and you to have more steering angle. Also, with the 3-hole adjustment on the lower ball joint, you can gain up to 40mm track width, or more camber, whichever way you want to go. So now it's time to prepare the lower control arm to go into the car, and to do that I first need to install the bushers and the lower ball joint. So first of all, the bushers. I've gone for the energy suspension bushers for a couple of reasons, but the main reason is they come with clear instructions, and all the bushers are numbered, so you can't get it wrong. So this busher's number is 2691, and that goes in the front of the lower control arm. So I'm going to put a little bit of lubricant on it, which is also supplied in the kit. And then you should be able to press these in by hand. The next bush is 2690, which goes in the back of the front. And then the metal sleeve, which number is 549. Again, a little bit of lubricant to the outside of this. Again, this can be pressed in by hand. Just keep a hand the other side while pushing it in so you don't push the second bush out. And then the back bushers, the front of the back bush is 2693. And the back bush is 2692. And then the back metal sleeve, which is 472. Now, if you're like me and you use a lot of lubricant, all you got to do now is wipe off the excess. And now for the lower ball joint. Of course, I've gone for a brand new one. This can just be slotted into the lower control arm. First thing you want to do is put the bolt in from the front. This can go in now as it's a slotted design to change the camber and the track width. Then you go ahead and put the nut on. It's now at this stage that you would choose one of the 3 adjustment bolt holes. So you could have it all the way in there where it's not an aggressive track width or camber. You can have slightly more, or you could go full on aggressive all the way out. I'm going to put my bolt in this one for now, and I'm going to see how that turns out. Now I'm just leaving these finger tight for the minute as I may be adjusting it, but I'd prefer to tighten these up when the lower control arm is secure on the car. So to attach the front lower control arm to the chassis, I've got the Skidnation alignment bolts. These are similar to the standard ones but with a few key differences. These are made out of 10.9 grade steel and they've been galvanised, so a very common problem with these alignment bolts on the MX5 is they seize or snap. This hopefully is going to stop that happening. They've also got a fine thread on the end, so they can take a little bit more torque. The front ones can be torqued up to 130 Newton meters, which is 20 Newton meters more than stock. But I've gone ahead and taken the movable alignment washer off, as I'm not going to be using that. And I'm going to be replacing that with the alignment lock set from Skidnation. This works by replacing the alignment washer. The outer part of the washer sits in the chassis between the two lugs and doesn't move. Then this part of the washer fits on the bolt like the standard alignment washer. Then they fit together and lock in position. And this has many positions where it can lock into. This is going to help when you're at the track doing some aggressive driving, or if you slightly nick a curb. That's going to hopefully help this keep the alignment. Fitting these arms into the subframe is exactly the same as fitting the standard ones, simply just slide them in. Now it's completely up to you if you do want to use a little bit lubricant here, but I've used enough assembly lube on these to not worry about it. Now for the alignment bolts. These are the bolts that attach the lower control arm to the subframe, and these are the Skidnation ones. If you're using them just like this, they could go in just like the standard bolts. But if you are using the alignment locks, you first need to take off the nut and the washer and remove the movable alignment washer. That then is replaced with the inner of the alignment lock. Installing these is exactly the same as the standard ones, but at the front all you've got to do is turn your steering all the way to the other side so you can gain access to putting the bolt in through the front. Now these shouldn't seize, but I've put a little bit of copper slip on them anyway. Then you can pop the D part of the locking assembly into the subframe. Slide the centre part of the lock on, and then using a spanner on the back, select the orientation you want. Make sure it all fits together snug. Pop the washer on, and then pop the nut on. You can then go ahead and torque these down to 130 Newton meters. Next on the list is the destroy or die front upper camber arm, and as you can see it's quite different to the standard one. They've changed the design around a bit. First off, they've widened the hole where the suspension goes through. This is going to allow for more clearance for when you've got coilovers, and the adjustable cups are a little bit bigger and they allow room for those to pass through. The next thing that's a bit different is the clearance here. They've changed the design so that the chassis will clear this bit, allowing you to have your car lower and not hit the chassis on the arm. And they've also made it so you can adjust the ball joint up to 40mm, so you can have as little camber as you want or as much as you want. And for a side-by-side look at these two, you can see it's quite a lot different. Mainly this big hole here. You can see you've got a lot more clearance for your suspension coilover. You can also see with the ball joint further out, you can gain a lot more track width and narrow out your camber. And you can see the added extra clearance you get so you don't hit the chassis. To put the bushes in the upper arms, it's very similar to the bottom. The bushes numbers are 2165. Again, just put a fair bit of lubricant inside and out, and the bushes can be pushed in. The difference being with these bushes, they're not a half bush, there is only one bush per side, and they have to go from the outside in. And this is where it's a little bit different to the bottom bushes. These ones are a little bit tighter to put in. These metal sleeve, the number is 575, and the best way I've found is to use a G-clamp or a vise or a great big pair of water pump pliers. Now the metal insert isn't going to push all the way through unless you're pushing into something that is hollow, but that's fine. I've found that when you put the long bolt in the top in the subframe, when you put the big washers there as well, tighten it up and they will pull where they need to be. To install the upper camber arm, it requires this great big long bolt, and believe me when I say I never want to unseize one of these again, so this is going to get a good paste and a copper slip. Now usually this bolt would have to slide through the anti-roll bar bracket that is connected to the chassis, but I've removed mine because it's now a solid mount. Make sure you've got your big washer either side, and on the back there's a little washer and then the nut. Now as you tighten this, all the metal inserts are going to sit where they need to sit in the bushers, and the arm in turn will sit where it needs to sit. This too needs to be torqued to 130 Newton meters. Now for the last part of the Destroy or Die Super Angle Kit, and that is the Super Knuckle. As you can tell, this looks very different to your standard knuckle. It's a shame I haven't got a standard knuckle to put this against. I've always ran modified knuckles, but nowhere near as good as this. So these Super Knuckles have got a 40mm roll center correction. They're going to eliminate bump steer, and they're going to help you get a lot more angle. So how this works is the spindle has changed position on the hub. Usually when you've lowered an MX5, the front lower control arm sits at a very weird angle. This is going to try bring this down level again to allow the suspension to do what the suspension has got to do. They've also changed the position where the tie rod connects to the hub, and this allows for more angle and a better steering response. This fits exactly how the standard hub would fit. The only difference is if you have got a Mark 2.5, this hasn't got an ABS hole, and you don't need to run the dust shield for the brake. Now that both arms are on, we can pop the Super Knuckle on. I'm going to pop it onto the bottom ball joint first, and then pop the castle nut on, and then you can pull the top arm down into the knuckle. Now you can't really torque these up as you can't get a socket and a torque wrench in here, but the top one, just give a very good nip, as that is a nylock nut, so that's not going to go anywhere. And the bottom one, the same. Do that up what you feel is good enough, and make sure the cutouts in the castle nut line up with the hole in the ball joint so you can get your split pin through. Before I go and put the coilover in, it's going to be a really good opportunity to show you the extra clearance you get here between the camber arm and the chassis. As you can see, you can get up that far without hitting the chassis. I'll take you in for a closer look. Now it's probably the best time to put in the coilover when all the suspension is still movable, so there's no anti-roll bar attached to it now, which is the thing that's going to stop the suspension moving down far enough for you to get the coilover in and out. Bit of copper slip on the bolt, pop the nut on and torque it down to 90 Newton meters. Then do up your top strut mounts. Obviously if you have a strut brace, put that on first. Now some of you may have seen my Instagram post on me reconditioning my coilovers, and they are almost 9 years old and they're in really good condition, but I want to make them last a little bit longer. So what I've got is a nice coilover sock to go over top of this and protect it a little bit more from the weather. Now usually you would zip tie this up nice and tight, but because I have put new suspension components all around, I am going to have to readjust the height, especially with the 40mm roll center correction. It's going to be a lot different. So I'm not going to waste tie wraps now, as this is going to be coming off again once the car is on the ground. Now to fit a nice new wheel bearing and hub onto the super knuckle, going to apply a light bit of grease to the spindle, grab the new wheel bearing and hub, make sure it's nice and square and tap it home. And then pop the nut on. Now this needs to be torqued up to 200 Newton meters. Then just using a hammer and chisel, just bend the nut down into the keyway in the spindle. Then tap on the bearing dust cover. Now this is usually the point where you would attach your anti-roll bar to your front lower control arm, but I'm going to be upgrading that very soon, so that I'll have to wait. It's also at this point where you would attach your tie rod to your hub, but many years ago I did make a mistake with the tie rod, so I'm also going to have to change that again in the near future. And you would also be putting your brakes on now, but I'm going to be upgrading them. So just for now, I'm going to put an old brake disc on, an old wheel, and we're going to see what sort of clearance we've got with this new kit. So now it's time to see what sort of clearance we've gained by fitting this kit to the car. Bearing in mind at the minute there is no spacer between the brake disc and the wheel, and there is no tie rod attached to the hub. The standard steering angle of the MX5 is usually just above 30 degrees. So what I can see by eye, this is straightforward. And if we turn all the way to the right, that's a pretty damn impressive angle. All the way to the left, so moving it full right lock, it's just hitting the upper camber arm there, so I may need a spacer at some point. And it's not even touching the lower arm. Now moving all the way to left lock. The same up above, it's just touching the upper arm. And it's just touching the tie rod. But the tie rod's not attached at the minute, but still looks like I may need a little spacer to move that a little bit further away. But it's clearing the chassis fine. And clearing the chassis fine back here, but I have actually removed all this metal here. Well, that's all for this episode. I hope you enjoyed it, and if this video did help you fit your front suspension, let me know down in the comments below. Everything I've installed today is in the description down below, so go check that out. But for now, I'm going to leave you with a couple of clips of different setups for this Destroy or Die suspension kit. So don't forget to like and subscribe, and I'll see you next time.
Yeah.